What's up, everybody? Nico Dwyer back for the 10th inning, here with another episode of This Day in Sports History. We don't have anything involving Colin Kaepernick today, but we do have some U.S. national championships to get into, some world records to talk about, and some Olympic Games to get into. So if y'all enjoy this video, leave a like on it. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Let's get to it. This Day in Sports History. And we will start off with the plethora of U.S. national championships. First, in 1884, on the men's side, Richard Sears would make it 4 straight U.S. single titles, defeating Howard Taylor 6-0, 1-6, 6-0, 6-2. This would be his 4th of 7 straight U.S. single titles and 7 Grand Slam single titles. We stay at the U.S. National Championship 6 years later in 1890, and Oliver Campbell would defeat two-time defending champion Henry Slocum 6-2, 4-6, 6-3, 6-1 to win his first of 3 straight U.S. single titles and 3 Grand Slam single titles. 4 years later in 1894, stay at the national championship and defending champion Robert Wren would defeat Manliff Goodbody 6-8, 6-1, 6-4, 6-4 to claim his second of 4 Grand Slam single titles. Now we move into the 1900s, but we remain at the U.S. National Championship in 1901. William Larned would defeat Beals Wright 6-2, 6-8, 6-4, 6-4 to win his first of 7 U.S. single titles and his first of 7 Grand Slam single titles. 1 year later, at the U.S. National Championship in 1902, defending champion William Larned would defeat R.F. Doherty 4-6, 6-2, 6-4, 8-6 to win his second of 7 Grand Slam single titles and U.S. single titles. Finally, at the U.S. National Championship in 1909, William Larned would once again win, this time defeating William Clothier 6-1, 6-2, 5-7, 1-6, 6-1 to win his 3rd straight and 5th overall U.S. singles title of 7 overall. We get off the U.S. National Championships now, and we move over to baseball in 1911 when Chicago White Sox pitcher Ed Walsh would no-hit Boston in a 5-0 victory. Walsh on the day, 9 innings pitched, 1 walk allowed, 8 strikeouts. 9 years later, we move to the Olympic Games in 1920, and there would be an American sweep of the 3-meter springboard event in diving, with Lewis Kewen winning gold with 675.4 points, besting teammates Clarence Pinkston, silver, and Lewis Ballback, bronze. Move up 2 years to 1922, and we have the first world record to talk about, and it's a name we haven't heard recently on this channel. But Pavel Nurmi would set the record in the 3,000 meters at 8 minutes 28.6 seconds. This would be broken less than 3 years later. Back to the U.S. National Championship in 1928, on the women's side this time, defending champion Helen Wills Moody would defeat Helen Jacobs 6-2, 6-1 to win her 5th of 7 U.S. single titles and her 8th of 19 Grand Slam single titles. Back to Major League Baseball now in 1937, and Fred Frankhouse, pitching for the Brooklyn Dodgers, would have an unofficial no-hitter over the Cincinnati Reds after 7 2/3 strong before being rained out. Frankhouse on the day did allow 6 walks, but he had the no-hitter going. It doesn't count though because of the early stoppage. But 1 year later, we do have an actual no-hitter in 1938. New York Yankees pitcher Monte Pearson would no-hit the Cleveland Indians in the Yankees' 13-0 victory. Pearson on the day, 9 innings pitched, 2 walks allowed, 7 strikeouts. Now we move up to the 1952 Olympic Games, and Emil Zatopek of Czechoslovakia would win the 12th Olympics marathon in an Olympic record time, 2 hours, 23 minutes, 3.2 seconds. We remain at the Olympics, but we move up 8 years to 1960, and we have one of the most controversial swimming contests of all time in the Olympics, when Australian swimmer John Devitt would win the controversial 100-meter freestyle gold medal after a recorded time of 55.2 seconds, but it was all hand-timed, so it was controversial whether he or Lance Larson of the USA did actually win. Via video replay, it did show Lance Larson of the USA did win, so the USA appealed it with videos showing that he won, but the appeal would be denied. However, this did bring in the electronic touchpad, so not all bad. Stay in those games in swimming, and British swimmer Anita Lounsborough would set the women's 200-meter breaststroke world record 2 minutes 49.5 seconds to win the gold and hold the record for 1 year. 15 years later, we move over to cycling and we have a crazy world record when Veronica and Colin Scargill would complete a tandem bicycle ride, a record 18,020 miles around the world. 3 years later, remain in cycling, this time on the solo side, and Jerry Knetemann would win the UCI Road World Championship to claim his only victory. Move back to Major League Baseball in 1982, and Rickey Henderson would steal his 119th, 120th, 121st, and 122nd stolen base of the season, but the first one was the one that mattered. The 119th stolen base would break Lou Brock's modern era record. Move over to tennis now, not at the US National Championship, but in the US Open in 1985, Mary Jo Fernandez at 14 years, 8 days old, would become the youngest player to win at the US Open, defeating Sarah Gomer 6-1, 6-4 in the first round matchup. 1 decade later in 1995, we have some women's golf and men's golf to talk about. First on the women's side, in the Canadian Open, Jenny Lidbeck would win 1 stroke ahead of runner-up Liselette Newman. Then in the US Amateur Championship, Tiger Woods would win his second of 3 amateur championships. 9 years later, we move to the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, and we will start off with China's first ever gold medal in men's track and field when Li Jian would win the 110-meter hurdles, equaling Colin Jackson's 1993 world record time, 12.91 seconds. This would actually be a record that Zhang would end up breaking 2 years later. Then we move over to the men's pole vault, and Timothy Mack of the USA would win the vault with an Olympic record 5.59 meters to win ahead of fellow teammate Toby Stevenson, who would get silver. Over to the women's javelin in those games, and Osleides Menendez of Cuba would set an Olympic record 71.53 meters to win the gold medal. Over to kayaking in those games, and Birgit Fischer of Germany would win the gold in the K4 500, becoming the first woman in any sport to win gold medals in 6 different Olympic Games. Over to men's field hockey in those games, and Australia would win its first ever Olympic gold medal in men's field hockey after a 2-1 victory against the Netherlands. Finally, in those games, we go to men's basketball, and we had a huge upset in the semifinal as Argentina would go on to defeat the USA 89-81. Argentina would end up winning the whole contest, but that was a huge upset defeat in the USA. Now we move back to golf in 2006 at the Tradition Senior Men's Golf Tournament. Eduardo Romero at 13 under would win his first of 2 Champions Tour majors after a birdie on the first playoff hole against Lonnie Nielsen. Up to 2011, and we have the opening of the 13th Athletics World Championship in South Korea. Stay in 2011 at the Tri-Nations Rugby Series, Australia would win 25-20 over New Zealand, winning their 3rd championship before the name was rebranded, but this would be their 3rd of 4 titles. 4 years later, we'd go to the Athletics World Championship in 2015, and Usain Bolt would win the men's 200-meter gold in 19.55 seconds, giving him the 100-200 meter double. We end today's video off in 2017 with in the Canadian Open, and Sun Hyun Park at 13 under would win 2 strokes ahead of runner-up Miriam Lee. So there you have it. That's what happened on this day in sports history. If I left anything out, I do apologize. If I mispronounced any names, I also apologize. But I'll see everybody tomorrow for Nick Ridgewire and the 10th inning. See ya.